Hidden inspections, leaked franchise manuals, and unfiltered employee accounts have uncovered a reality about Subway that the glossy ads never show. Beneath the promise of "eat fresh" lies a finely tuned system built for speed, sameness, and relentless cost control, one that quietly trades away quality, safety, and trust. From bread that legally isn't bread, to meats engineered in industrial molds, from health code violations that number in the thousands, to franchise practices that squeeze owners until corners get cut, the picture is larger and more troubling than any single scandal. What you're about to hear isn't rumor or isolated complaint. It's a pattern woven deep into the way the world's largest sandwich chain operates. And once you know how it works, you'll never look at that counter, that bread smell, or that neatly wrapped sub the same way again. Let's start. Part 1. Subway's DNA. Standardization over substance. Under bright glass and uniform light, a loaf slides from an oven and lands on a cooling rack with the precision of an assembly line. A number follows it everywhere, the sugar load that once made regulators question whether this could even be called bread. That moment matters because it reveals the blueprint behind the brand. Standardize everything until the story of fresh becomes a repeatable pattern, identical at noon in Phoenix and midnight in Tokyo. The promise is predictability. The cost is what gets stripped out along the way. Picture the footlong that taught the world to measure lunch by the inch. The math behind it is not culinary, it's logistical. Recipes are tuned for consistency first, doughs built to behave the same in dozens of climates, baked by workers on short shifts, inside small ovens that never stop. To get there, sweetness creeps higher, conditioners enter the mix, and the line between bakery aroma and engineered scent blurs until the nose is convinced before the tongue has a chance. The smell that drifts into a mall corridor is not storytelling by accident. It's the opening act of a system designed to guide you from air to order to checkout with as few variables as possible. Follow a frozen stick of dough from depot to store. It travels like a part, not a food. Stacked, coated, timed. When it arrives, the ritual is a sequence. Thaw, proof, bake. No deliberation required. What comes out the other side is a shape everyone recognizes and no one questions. The crusts look the same because they must. The crumb looks the same because the formula demands it. It's efficient, it's scalable, and it sets the tone for everything that happens next behind the glass. By the way, subscribe for not losing content about the reality of your favorite restaurants. Now lift the lid on the protein rail. The meats don't begin life as roasts resting overnight in a quiet kitchen. They arrive pre-cooked, pre-seasoned, sealed against oxygen and doubt. The mandate is uniform taste, a ham that tastes like ham everywhere, a turkey that refuses to surprise you, a chicken that fits the bread's footprint with the neatness of a template. Industrial molds handle the geometry. High-pressure processing disciplines texture. The industry has a polite phrase for it, restructured meat products, because taken apart and put back together so it behaves the same, is too honest for a menu board. Imagine a cold cut whose biography spans multiple plants. Trim from here, muscle from there, binders and brines to keep everything obedient under a heat lamp and a rush. The idea isn't deceit, it's control. When you slice, every piece falls the same way. When you stack, the layers don't fight back. When you bite, your brain recognizes the signal and files it under comfort. Standardization wins again, even if nuance loses every argument. There is a story the chicken tells too, not of farms and quiet mornings, but of spreadsheets. Protein blends that lean on soy to stabilize cost and texture. Flavor systems that amplify what would otherwise fade during storage and transit. The goal is not a singular, memorable bite. It is a reliable one. Tap the same keys, get the same output. If different meats begin to taste related, it is because they share a supply chain and a philosophy more than they share a pasture. Return to the front of the line and watch the choreography of freshness. The aroma arrives first, priming hunger, drifting just far enough to catch people who didn't know they were hungry yet. Then the bread, always the same curves, the same score marks, meets ingredients that have already been negotiated into compliance. Lettuce that behaves under tongs, tomatoes that hold shape, meats that sit flat, condiments with viscosities tuned for speed. What looks like a sandwich is also a system, and every step has been simplified until human judgment is optional. In this world, uniformity is not a side effect, it is the product. Timers replace instincts, scales replace feel. Training becomes shorter because there is less to learn. The machine has already decided how things should look, taste, and smell. Even the mess is standardized. Crumbs that fall the same way, paper that wraps with the same creases, ovens that beep in the same tone across continents. If craft is a conversation between ingredients and the person holding the knife, this is a monologue delivered by a process that never raises its voice. And yet, as the camera lingers on the line, something else becomes clear. A system like this doesn't merely reduce risk, it reduces variance. It protects margins but trims character. It promises you will never be disappointed and quietly ensures you will rarely be surprised. The bread that never misbehaves, the meat that never disagrees, the smell that always arrives on cue, these are triumphs of design, not expressions of food. The brand's DNA has been optimized for sameness, and sameness is exactly what it delivers, bite after predictable bite. Part 2. Operational practices that keep costs down and quality in question. The contract arrives like a promise and a warning, a thick binder that turns a dream of independence into a rule book of obedience. Before a single sandwich is sold, fees are due, royalties are set, a marketing levy skims each transaction, and the supply chain is locked. The catalog of approved vendors reads like scripture. The price of tomatoes is not the price across the street, it is the price decided upstream, and it tends to sit on the page like a weight. When the owner runs the numbers at midnight, the margin on a popular sub looks like a thin thread tugging against promotions no one at the store requested, but everyone must honor. The morning crew unlocks the door and steps into a clock. Timers glow, ovens preheat, bins are filled according to charts that measure, not taste, but throughput. Training is fast because the system is designed to make judgment unnecessary. A video explains the choreography, and then the line takes over. The new hire learns to count slices instead of reading the thickness of a cut, to follow scoop sizes rather than listening to hunger, to align sauces by pattern so the sandwich looks right, even if it feels light. Precision is mandatory. Discretion is optional. By noon, the store shrinks to a single problem: hold the line with not enough hands. A cashier folds into a prep cook, who folds into a cleaner, who turns into a runner for deliveries. One-person shifts are a savings on paper and a strain in reality. When the lunch wave hits, the decision tree tightens. Gloves handle cash and then reach for lettuce because the line is 4 deep and the buzzer is counting. A thermometer is there, but the number that matters most is the queue length. The bin that should be replaced is stirred instead, and a date label becomes an eraser rather than a record. Behind the glass, portion control is a language of rulers and templates. Bread length has a stencil, meat has a count, cheese has a geometry. Every topping is a unit, every unit a cost. The system protects consistency by reducing the room where generosity lives. The knife stops at the mark. The scoop stops at the level. If the eye hesitates, the scale clarifies. A sandwich assembled under these rules will always meet the photo's layout and rarely exceed it. At 3 in the afternoon, an email arrives from corporate announcing a new national promotion that turns a bestseller into a break-even gift. The owner cannot opt out. The brand must look unified from coast to coast. Posters will ship, coupons will print, and the store will honor them even if the math fails. The only lever left is speed. Serve more, staff less. Hope volume smothers the loss. Maintenance waits. The ice machine that needs a deep clean will get a wipe. The slicer that deserves a blade will get another day. A hand-wash sink becomes a shelf because the boxes need somewhere to sit and no one has minutes to rearrange the back room. Even cleaning adapts to the pressure of the clock. The right way takes longer. The fast way becomes a habit. A tub of mayo that should be discarded is relabeled because tomorrow will be busier. A pan of tomatoes should be culled. It is topped instead. The cooler whispers a temperature that is technically acceptable, and the door stays shut because opening it again will set off the alarm, and the alarm will summon an audit. Some stores rehearse for surprise inspections like a play. Floors shine on cue, thermometers appear in pockets, and lists are checked until the parking lot empties again. Labor sits at the edge of the spreadsheet like a warning light. Wages hold near the bottom of the market. Turnover keeps knowledge shallow. A manager teaches shortcuts not out of malice but necessity because the lunch rush will not negotiate and the budget will not bend. When someone calls in sick, the shift becomes a test of endurance. The line does not slow down for human limits, and the human learns to move like the line. Supply is just as inflexible. The produce truck arrives with exactly what the program allows. The owner can see cheaper, fresher alternatives a few doors down, but the agreement bars improvisation. Buying outside the network risks penalties, and penalties erase months of effort, so the store pays more for the same case, the same lettuce, the same onions, because compliance is the price of the logo above the door. Everything accelerates to protect the margin. The bread is baked on a schedule that turns minutes into cost. The meats are portioned to the gram to turn waste into predictability. The toppings are arranged to look abundant without being generous. The customer walks away with a sandwich that photographs well and weighs less than memory suggests. The difference between impression and reality is measured in pennies per unit, and pennies per unit add up to whether the lights stay on. At closing, the store returns to the ledger. What did we sell? What did we save? What did we stretch? A pan that should be tossed becomes tomorrow's starter. A checklist is completed by habit rather than conviction. The back door opens to the night, and a manager tapes a memo to the wall about a brand refresh that will require new signage, new uniforms, a remodel. The cost is the franchisees. The benefit is the brands. Somewhere in the small print is a due date that does not care about last month's loss. This is how an operation turns efficiency into a creed. Complexity is sanded down until anyone can do any job after a few hours, which means the jobs must be simple and the outcomes must be fixed. Food becomes units, units become costs, and costs become the measure by which every decision is judged. What gets sacrificed is not just flourish or flair. It is the space in which quality breathes and safety insists. Shortcuts don't arrive as scandals. They arrive as habits, 1 minute shaved at a time, one rule bent in a rush, one label changed to survive another week. By the time the door locks, the store has hit its key performance indicators and missed something older than metrics. The pursuit of speed has left fingerprints on taste. The pursuit of control has left shadows on care. The pursuit of savings has left the team tired and the product thinner. What begins as an operational strategy becomes a customer experience. Efficient, tidy, and strangely hollow. And as these habits entrench, their consequences gather in places the public can count and inspectors can measure, setting the stage for what the next part will reveal. Part 3. Health, Safety, and Brand Integrity Challenges. Open the back door of a rush hour store and step into the thrum of compressors and timers. The air is cool until you lift a lid that should be colder. A metal pan whispers a number no one wants to read. 72 degrees where there should be 40. Tuna that was safe in the morning now stands at the edge of a line that the body recognizes the hard way. This is how violations begin, not as headlines, but as temperatures that drift and practices that harden into habit. An inspector arrives without drama, clipboard in one hand and a quiet patience in the other. They move the way experience moves, straight to the places where systems reveal their weak seams. A glove that handled cash 10 minutes ago reaches for lettuce. The same cutting board that met raw protein hosts a row of tomatoes now shining under fluorescent light. A sink meant for hand washing is blocked by boxes because there is nowhere else to put them. Soap dispensers sputter water that was meant to be a substitute for time. Nothing catastrophic, each a small concession, yet together they sketch a map of how pressure rewrites rules. The tour continues to the ice machine, where cold should mean clean. A light sweep of a swab returns a story no one wants to tell customers. Mold does not announce itself. It collects in corners, grows behind panels, waits under gaskets. On a wall behind the prep counter, a dark bloom has been wiped in circles so many times the paint wears thin. In the cooler, produce looks tired before it is old. Lettuce with soil that should have been washed away a day ago sits next to containers whose lids remember a different life holding chemicals. The checklist on the wall says everything is fine. The evidence says the checklist has become decoration. By the end of the day, the numbers will add up to something larger than a single store. Critical violations rise like steam across the map, counted in the thousands over a single year. Temperature control is the refrain. Cross-contamination becomes a rhythm. Pest control joins the chorus not because the stores are careless, but because the line is long, the staff is thin, and the margins punish anything that slows the choreography. A slicer waits for a cleaning that always seems scheduled for tomorrow. A thermometer reads what people hope to see. When the door swings open to a crowd, hope proves faster than protocol. By the way, subscribe for not losing content about the reality of your favorite restaurants. These are not isolated missteps. They are the natural consequences of an operating model tuned for speed and sameness. When shifts compress and training thins, the chain of custody around safety grows fragile. When compliance is a performance, standards sparkle at inspection and fade when the car leaves the lot. The brand's promise of reliability is real, but its shadow is equally real. A culture where adherence to procedure is measured against the clock, and the clock wins more often than it should. Now watch how another number reshapes the landscape. Store count. For years, expansion was the simplest story to tell investors and the hardest story for franchisees to survive. Locations multiplied until signs faced signs across parking lots, until a single town could order the same sandwich 6 different ways from 6 doors that all looked alike. Territory protections were thin. New openings didn't grow the pie, they sliced it thinner. Sales migrated a few blocks at a time, turning neighbors into competitors under the same banner. The effect shows up on nightly receipts. What once averaged nearly $500,000 a year slides toward a lower plateau as foot traffic fractures. Promotions arrive from above to stimulate demand, but drain the till. A franchise that costs dearly to open no longer sells for a price that respects the risk taken or the work invested. Owners who want out discover that contracts can be cages when buyers need permission, and permission favors a corporate plan that doesn't account for a particular family's fatigue. Inside the stores, this erosion becomes tangible. Staffing shrinks because revenue shrinks. Maintenance stretches because cash is tight. Remodel mandates arrive with the weight of a logo and the lightness of empathy. New signage, new uniforms, refreshed interiors, costs justified as brand investment, hit operators who are already measuring pennies in produce. The face of the brand brightens while the hands that keep it running grow tired. The customer sees a gleaming menu and feels a faster line. The owner sees another invoice. Brand integrity doesn't fail in a day. It frays. First in the bite that feels lighter than memory, then in the sandwich that looks correct but eats thin, then in the visit that feels transactional rather than cared for. Stories begin to circulate, not of a single scandal, but of a steady decline. A long-time regular notices that the joy has leaked out of the experience, replaced by a competent efficiency that does not invite affection. The chain's greatest strength, its predictability, becomes the lens through which sameness reads as flatness. Meanwhile, the inspection reports keep score in a way customers rarely see. Violations corrected, yes. Violations repeated, yes. Each fix documented, each fix fragile. The standard can be restored with attention, but attention costs time, and time is the commodity the model has been designed to squeeze. When a district manager visits, the store remembers what perfect compliance looks like. When they leave, the pressures reassert themselves, not because people do not care, but because the system cares more about minutes than about margins of safety. All of this converges in a reputation that no remodel can fully polish. A brand is not only a set of colors and fonts. It is the feeling a customer carries out the door. When news accumulates about closures, when friends mention a bad bite, when social feeds trade quips about portion sizes, trust doesn't collapse so much as it loosens. The logo still draws, but it draws less often. A sandwich that once felt like a safe default becomes a choice that invites a pause. The deeper truth is not mysterious. Build a machine to maximize sameness and speed, and it will deliver those outcomes with precision. Ask that same machine to protect quality and care under relentless cost pressure, and it will struggle in the places that are hardest to measure. A thermometer will tell you when food is at risk. A ledger will tell you when a store is at risk. A brand's silence, when customers stop talking about it with warmth, tells you when meaning is at risk. By the time the last employee wipes the line and lowers the gate, the day's contradictions stand side by side. The operation hit its marks and bent its rules. The brand looked polished and felt thinner. The violations were corrected and poised to return the next time a rush demanded corners be rounded. This is the quiet crisis at the heart of the model, the distance between what the system optimizes and what a guest hopes to taste. In the next part, the timeline catches up to the present, where new pressures and promises collide, and the cost of holding the line becomes impossible to ignore. Part 4, Recent and Emerging Issues, 2024 to 2025. The map tells the story before the press release does. Pins that once crowded the screen grow sparse, then thin into gaps you can trace with a finger across counties and highways. In 2024, doors close in clusters, and the count slips under a threshold the brand hadn't crossed in decades. More than 600 U.S. locations shut their ovens for the last time, each one a quiet accounting of rent, labor, and a line that no longer justified the lights. For customers, it's a shorter list of lunch options. For operators, it is proof that the model that once scaled like a miracle now contracts like a tide. Inside the stores that remain, a different pressure tightens. A promotion arrives from headquarters with glossy artwork and a cheerful promise. The price is sharp enough to pull foot traffic, but the math at the register cuts the other way. Franchisees do not get to choose whether to participate. The brand must look unified from coast to coast. The discount lands like a stone in a shallow margin, and the only lever left is volume. Sell more, earn less, hope the week evens out. When it doesn't, the losses get absorbed in places the guest cannot see. Fewer hands on the line, slower fixes for equipment, a back room that becomes a storage puzzle instead of a workspace. Another memo follows with a different kind of mandate. A refresh of the brand identity, a remodel to align the look with a new campaign, uniforms that will photograph better under LEDs. The timeline is firm, the standards exacting, the costs owner-borne. A franchisee prints the checklist and tapes it beside a monthly P&L that already runs too close to zero. Trade dress advances, cash flow retreats. The store looks newer by spring, but the debt it carries ages the people who run it. At the same time, a pledge made years ago ticks toward its deadline. The promise was simple enough to say aloud: a transition to more ethical sourcing by 2025, including a move to cage-free eggs. The calendar catches up, and guests begin to ask if the pledge became practice. Answers are soft. Transparency is thinner than hoped. The gap between commitments and execution becomes another place where trust leaks, not because a sandwich hinges on a single egg, but because the brand's word is supposed to mean something measurable. Labor adds its own chapter. Investigators step through time cards and tip jars and find hours padded in the wrong direction, gratuities rolled where they don't belong, overtime evaded by arithmetic rather than scheduling. The penalties are real, the back wages significant, and the headlines land in a culture already suspicious that the speed of the line is bought with fatigue. For workers, it confirms what they felt in their bones. For guests, it scratches at the comfort of a familiar routine. For owners, it is another bill in a pile of obligations that feel both necessary and impossible. Marketing tries to outrun the mood with spectacle. A campaign flashes sandwiches stacked like monuments, steak folded in generous ribbons, sauces drawn in ribbons that glitter under studio light. Then a customer unwraps the real thing and measures what a camera promised against what a hand holds. A lawsuit argues the gap is not artistic license but misrepresentation, pointing to a difference in meat that looks like a rounding error on a spreadsheet and feels like a breach in a dining room. At the counter, staff meet the frustration that advertising set in motion. They cannot fix a photograph with an extra slice. The portion is a policy, not a decision. Menu experiments appear with names engineered for virality and limited-time urgency. Some spark curiosity, others trigger a shrug. The novelty feels familiar, the customization narrower than memory, the portions more precise than generous. Online, longtime patrons frame it bluntly. The brand looks sleeker and tastes smaller. The new signage is bright. The experience is dimmer. What was once a ritual now feels transactional. The word that keeps appearing is joyless. Not because a sandwich must be art to matter, but because it used to carry a little delight. Meanwhile, the old debate refuses to retire. Ingredient authenticity remains a point of contention that flares without fully resolving. The company repeats its assurances with the cadence of a statement practiced many times. Skeptics repeat their doubts with the cadence of a chorus that won't fade. In the gap between those rhythms, consumers do what they always do when certainty is scarce. They hesitate. A small pause can be the difference between a line that hums and a line that thins. All of these threads converge in the only place that ultimately matters: behavior. Fewer stores mean fewer chances for a default choice to win by proximity. Promotions that erase margin turn owners into tacticians of survival rather than hosts of a meal. Remodels polish the mask while the face behind it looks tired. Pledges that stall teach customers to discount promises. Labor violations teach employees to watch the door for better offers. Marketing that gilds the image teaches the public to look twice. Each element alone might be absorbed. Together, they form a weather system. You can feel it during a weekday lunch when the line should be 10 deep and is only 3. A teenager in a crisp new uniform scans an order twice because the toppings changed last week and the training was a video that buffered. A manager keeps one eye on the oven timer and the other on the front door, willing a rush that never quite arrives. A stack of new posters waits in the back, still in their protective sleeves, because the team hasn't found the hour to take down the old campaign. On a shelf above the hand sink, a box leans where it shouldn't, not because no one knows better, but because the back room is a geometry problem with more variables than space. The brand is not unaware. It invests in media, signals progress, announces partnerships, tests items that ride the edges of nostalgia and novelty. It is not a villain. It is a machine trying to find traction on a road that changed while it was busy optimizing. Some days the fixes land. The sandwich eats better than memory. The line moves with purpose. A guest leaves full and pleased. Other days the machine falls back to its averages, and the averages are not inspiring. This is what the present looks like when viewed without the blur of habit. A system engineered for sameness struggles in an era that rewards character. A network built for ubiquity finds ubiquity shrinking. A promise of fresh begins to sound like a branding term rather than an experience. The question that matters is no longer whether the model worked. It did brilliantly for years. The question is whether it can adapt without flattening the very qualities that adaptation requires: flexibility, local judgment, generosity, care. If the answer is yes, it will show up first in places that don't make headlines. A cooler that reads the right number in the middle of a rush. A hand sink cleared because there is finally room to do things correctly. A promotion designed with franchise economics in mind as well as brand optics. A pledge met on schedule and explained plainly. A photo that looks like the sandwich you unwrap. A menu that feels built for human appetite rather than marketing cadence. None of that is impossible. All of it is work. If the answer is no, the map will keep speaking. Another pin will go dark. Another owner will step away. Another guest will choose something else without making a point of it. A brand doesn't collapse in a single moment. It becomes a quieter presence in the places it once defined. The world moves forward, and the machine that once set the pace starts to jog behind. You don't need a headline to see which way the wind is blowing. You only need to stand by the line for an hour, listen to the rhythm of a store that has been trained to move like a metronome, and ask whether the beat still matches what people want to eat. If this helped you see the full picture, like and subscribe.